The one exercise that is almost universally regarded as the ultimate test of strength is the deadlift. Tracing back as early as 6th century BC, today it is still used to find out who the strongest man or woman is. And it's not just weightlifters who have a respect for this exercise. If you walk into any random gym and there's a person in there deadlifting over 220 kilos, people regularly stop and stare. Here's a video of myself deadlifting back when I was at university. As you can see, pretty much the entire gym stopped to watch this set, and you're not going to get this reaction from any other lift. The feeling you get from a deadlift is second to none as well. Never do I feel more alpha or more powerful than when I've just hit a deadlift PR. And so if you want to have this same feeling and learn how to start increasing your deadlift, to start hitting these crazy PRs, then this is the video for you. But before we get into the video, I want to make sure that you guys first of all like the video. It really helps to push the video out there. By the end of this video, make sure you drop a comment if this video was useful and any other thoughts that you have, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss more content from me. So without any further ado, let's get straight into the video. What's up guys, it's your boy Nathaniel Messiah, and today I'm going to be teaching you my top 5 tips to increase your deadlift. Now, before we get into the video, I thought I'd just list some of my credentials when it comes to the deadlift. So I am a 93 kilo junior powerlifter in the IPF, and this year I had the highest international deadlift of anyone in my age and weight class, with a deadlift of 342.5 kilos at the European Championships. This won me the European Championships, and I also had the joint highest deadlift at World Championships, where I came 3rd with 340 kilos. Now, my deadlift prowess hasn't been a recent phenomenon. When I was 16, I hit 260 kilos. When I was 17, I hit 300 kilos. When I was 18, I hit 320 kilos. And then this year, where I was 20, I hit 342.5 kilos. So I feel fairly qualified to talk to you guys about some of the main things you can do to increase your deadlift, as I know that one of the first things that people are going to point to is genetics, right? And while yes, I do have some genetic factors at play specifically for the deadlift, in other words, really long arms, genetically good body parts for the deadlift, this isn't the only reason why I've been able to get to this point. I've had plateaus, I've had slowdowns in progress. In fact, between the ages of 18 and 19, I was only able to add 5 kilos to my deadlift. However, within the last year, I've been able to add 17.5 kilos to my all-time deadlift and 37.5 kilos to my competition deadlift as an already advanced lifter. So while genetics are a factor for any top deadlifter, I would not have got to the point where I am today without some of the tips that I'm going to share with you guys. So without any further introduction, let's get straight into the tips. So my first tip for you guys is to build a strong foundation. Now let's take it all the way back. This is 14-year-old Nathaniel deadlifting 140 kilos for 2 reps. Now, no matter how good my technique and execution was at this point, there's not a single way that 14-year-old Nathaniel would be able to deadlift 340 kilos because he simply did not have the muscle mass for it. And this is because, all things being equal, a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle. And while deadlifts are probably the most leverage-based lift, where some lighter weight lifters may be able to outlift some heavyweight lifters, this doesn't change the fact that you need to build a significant amount of mass in order to move a significant amount of mass. So whether you're just starting out in the gym or you're an advanced lifter trying to increase your deadlift, the number one thing I would recommend is to focus on building more muscle. Now, the main areas where you need this muscle is in your back, your glutes, and your hamstrings. These are going to be the prime movers for the deadlift. And if I had to pick 3 deadlift specific muscle building exercises, my picks would be the weighted pull-up, the seated cable row, and the hamstring curl. So the reason why this is my first tip is, if you didn't do anything else right, you didn't focus on your form, let's say you didn't even deadlift, right? If you packed on 10, 20, 30 pounds of solid muscle, especially within the right areas, i.e. your posterior chain, your deadlift is going to go up. So especially if there's any beginners watching this video, of course you want to be focused on your deadlifts, but first of all, you want to be focusing on packing on the size. Almost all of your favorite deadlifters have ridiculously developed backs. And so if you want to be one of them, you're gonna have to earn that back also. Tip number 2 is to find your weak point. So generally speaking, you only get so far just deadlifting before you need to add certain things in order to facilitate more progress. And typically within the deadlift, most people have a weak point. For some people, especially sumo lifters, this is off the ground. For other people, this is at lockout. And for some people like myself, it was around the knee area. So once you find your weak point within the deadlift, what you want to do is find a variation that targets that weak point and then using that to overload that area. Now, whether you're able to find a weak point within your deadlift or not, I would really recommend doing deadlift variations as one of the main main ways to facilitate deadlift progress, as it allows you to pinpoint certain areas of the deadlift and start working on those weaknesses. So there's multiple deadlift variations. You've got pause deadlifts, you've got stiff leg deadlifts, you've got Romanian deadlifts, you've got deficit deadlifts, you've got block pulls. A lot of different ones to choose from, but if I had to recommend any of those, my two recommendations would be the pause deadlift and the stiff-legged deadlift. Pause deadlifts are great because they allow you to spend more time where that weakness is. If your weakness is off the floor, you can pause literally as soon as you break the floor. If your weakness is around the knees, then you can pause around the knees. And then my personal favorite, the stiff-legged deadlift, I really recommend because for me, my main weak point within the deadlifts was my hamstrings and getting the bar over that knee portion. So stiff-legged deadlifts for me really helped to target my hamstrings and strengthen up that middle portion of the deadlift. Another thing with deadlift variations, and particularly the stiff-legged deadlift, is that they help you be able to train intensely without having to use too much weight and overloading your central nervous system. As I said, I deadlift 342.5 kilos. I've never stiff leg deadlifted over 220 kilos for 5 reps. So it allows me to keep training hard without having to expose myself to those higher loads, which when you start to increase in your deadlift, takes a bigger toll on your body than when you were a beginner. Now my next tip leads directly on from that one, and that is to find your training sweet spot. Now there are 3 main training principles. There's volume, there's intensity, and there's frequency. Volume is how many total sets per week you're doing. Intensity is more or less how hard you're training, and this is either measured in the weights that you're using themselves or the RPE or percentage of your 1 rep max that you're using. And then there's frequency, which is how often you're training, or in this case, how often within the week that you're deadlifting. Now when it comes to frequency, I would recommend deadlifting between 1 to 2 times per week. I would not recommend going over 2 times per week deadlifting because the deadlift is such a huge exercise. It incorporates so many of your muscles that more so than any exercise is prone to taxing your central nervous system. Now just like your body, this needs recovery, so I wouldn't recommend going over 2 times a week deadlifting. When it comes to volume also, with the deadlift being such a big exercise, it doesn't require the same amount of volume as other exercises do to see progress. I myself was progressing a deadlift doing 1 top set per week. But what I would typically recommend is 6 working sets per week is a good starting point. And dividing that up with 2 times a week deadlifting is just 3 sets on one day and then 3 sets on another day. And then when it comes to intensity, leading off from tip number 2 is that one of the common ways to program a deadlift and any other lift is to have a primary and a secondary day. On the primary day, you're just doing your normal deadlifts, and on the secondary day, you're going to be doing some form of variation. And then when it comes to intensity, you want to be within that RPE 5 to RPE 8 kind of zone. You don't want to be going too maximal all the time because this isn't the most optimal way to make progress. So an easy deadlift program would look like Tuesday doing 3 sets of pause deadlifts at around RPE 6. By the way, I didn't explain what RPE is. RPE means rate of perceived exertion. It basically just means a score out of 10 in terms of how hard that set was. But yeah, and then on your primary day, you're gonna be doing normal competition deadlifts, a top single, and then 2 sets between 3 to 5 reps. And that's a pretty standard deadlift program that will work for most people. Tip number 4 is to master your grip. Now, if you've ever been to a powerlifting competition or if you ever watched a powerlifting competition, you'll know that one of the most common ways for guys to fail deadlifts is just on grip. And this is probably one of the saddest ways to fail a deadlift because it doesn't matter how strong you are, if you can't hold on to the bar, then it's all for nothing. So this is why I think grip is slightly underappreciated because guys will almost take it for granted. Now, in terms of actually gripping the dead, there are 2 main ways to do it. There's the mixed grip or over-under grip, where one of your hands you grip over, the other hand you grip under. This method pretty much works for most people. It's not painful. The risk of injury is also pretty low because as long as you're keeping your arm straight, the risk of your supinated arm actually having a bicep tear or anything like that is really low. And then yeah, this pretty much just works for most people. Now the next grip is hook grip. This is where you basically pinch your thumb with your finger and this basically keeps the bar in place. It looks like a double overhand, but it's actually not. Now this grip can be more secure for certain lifters. I would assume it works slightly better with sumo lifters also. The problem with this is that it can be really painful, especially at the beginning and especially with higher rep sets. This can be extremely painful. Guys have even talked about stuff like nerve damage in their thumbs and whatnot. Some people have problems with it, some people don't. It really just depends. But regardless, whatever grip you choose, you just want to make sure that it's comfortable and secure for you. But that wasn't the main thing I wanted to talk about when it came to grip. That's not the reason why this is one of my main tips. The reason this is one of my main tips is because I think a lot of guys are doing something crucially wrong within their training, and that is using straps way too much. The way I look at it is like this, and of course this isn't completely correct, but this is just the way I look at it. If you can't hold on to a 90 kilo lat pull down, then how are you gonna hold on to a 300 kilo deadlift? Like, I know it's not that simple, and I know guys have different reasons for using straps and especially back exercises and whatnot, but for the most part, your grip should not be a limiting factor on your accessory work if it's actually gonna be strong enough to hold up on your main deadlifts. Like, I very rarely have grip issues, right? And one of the reasons I think it's because I literally never use straps. On none of my back work, none of my deadlift work, I'm always using my hands and my grip strength, so my grip is always getting trained. Last week, for example, I was doing Bulgarian split squats from 40 kilos down to like 35 kilos in each hand. And by the end, my forearms were pretty sore into the next couple of days, but I know that was training my grip. And so when it comes to actual grip training, I haven't really had to do anything. Now, yes, it's true that your grip strength doesn't always progress as fast as your muscle strength does, but this message more so goes out to a beginner. If you never use straps in the first place, then you generally won't know what you're missing. And for me now, there's almost no exercise where my grip is a limiting factor, and that's because I've just pretty much never used straps, literally a handful of times in my life. So yeah guys, start using straps less on all your accessory movements and watch your grip strength skyrocket. Tip number 5, the last tip that I have for you guys, is to master arousal. Not that type of arousal, sports arousal, which is basically your psychological state of readiness. This is on a scale from you at home, sleeping, chilling, to you absolutely cracked out on about 10 scoops of pre, about to lift your entire bloodline. And being all the way there isn't always best, and not knowing how to control your emotions in your state of arousal can make you fail lifts that your body is otherwise capable of doing, but your mind just isn't in the right place. What I found is that the deadlift, more so than other lifts, seems to benefit from slightly higher arousal, particularly the conventional deadlift. There's not as many technique cues that I need to remember when I'm deadlifting as there are when I'm squatting or benching, so I seem to be able to get away with really high arousal, you know, absolutely cracked out, just going for it. But if I'm too hyped up and I'm too anxious, then that can actually change the way that I've lifted. And there's been multiple lifts I've failed in the past, partially because I've changed the way that I've been deadlifting right beforehand because I'm so anxious. And particularly if you aren't as advanced a lift, or if you do sumo deadlifts, there are a lot more technique cues that you actually do need to remember in order to perform a successful deadlift, where you being absolutely cracked out isn't actually optimal. So basically you just want to experiment with trial and error to find your sweet spot. It's an area where you're hyped up enough that you actually feel ready and prepared to give your all to a set, but you're not too hyped up that you're actually going to start to be a detriment to yourself. And the psychological side of lifting weights is a pretty underrated aspect. I mean, Eddie Hall, when he went for the 500 kilo deadlift, literally was getting hypnotized and went to a sports psychologist to figure out how he could best put his mind in the place that would allow him to be most successful at the lift. So all the factors I've talked about prior to this have all been to do with your body, but your body's only one piece of the pie, your mind is another one. And you see this happen a lot, especially at powerlifting meets, right? There's tons of times where guys fail, not because their body isn't strong enough, but maybe because their mind isn't in the right place, or maybe because of poor attempt selection, or maybe because of a bunch of factors, right? It's not all down to your body. And just trust that it will come with time. When it comes to sport-specific self-efficacy, the number one factor that helps your self-confidence is previous experience. And the more previous experience that you build up, the more times I can say, okay, you know, I was scared about this weight, but I went and I did it, it was fine, you know, I have these times I can call back on, then the more confident I'm gonna be going forward and the more trust that I can build in myself. So yeah, just trust that it will come with time. If you keep going, you keep pushing, you're gonna eventually reach your goals. So yeah guys, that just about wraps it up. Let me know if this was a helpful video. Let me know if you want me to do another one. Thank you for watching this video. Again, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. I have another one of these videos on the bench press. If you haven't watched, you can go and watch already. But yeah guys, thank you for watching this video. I'll see you in a bit.